Hey everybody, welcome back to the Connection Project. Sally Davidson here for another week, and I have an amazing guest. And I know they say that every week, but that's how it seems to me. I'm super excited today to be here with Tiffany Homan. And Tiffany, I met just randomly online. She is another nurse coach, and I know I've had a few on so far, but they have so much to bring to the table and so much to talk about with connection and what they're doing to change their career path and actually, in my opinion, their lives with this change that's happened. And it really all stems back to connecting back to themselves and their families and their faith or whatever it is for them. And I just love to hear everybody's stories. So, Tiffany is here with us today, and Tiffany is a business coach. She was I'm like a little bit off my game today, Tiffany. I don't know what's going on with me. But I like keep it real here at
I
the
love
Connection
that.
Project. Yeah, she's a board certified nurse coach and a somatic practitioner. She was a bedside nurse, I believe an ER nurse who
I
left and
was.
started her nurse coaching. She supports her clients in deepening their self-awareness, creating safety in the body, and stepping into their own inner knowing, allowing themselves to break free from the past and experience the present. So there's nothing more about connection than that, right? Connecting back to our body. So Tiffany and I met. Welcome, Tiffany. We're so excited to have you here today with us, and I can't wait to like get into all the juice that I know we're going to get into today. And Tiffany and I met, never in person, but we met. We were going to facilitate a retreat together in Hawaii. Then Tiffany couldn't go. And we chatted here and there. And so we were in the same kind of nurse coaching circles. And yeah, the other day I was just thinking, and I'm like, yeah, I just need to like get into the juicy deets of what's happening with her right now here, because I know that everything that I see her doing is around connection and creating a life that you really desire and allowing yourself to connect back to your body. And she's a somatic practitioner, which you all know that I love. And yeah, so I'm just really here to talk to you today about like, what is connection to you? And how your story, because you definitely have a
Mhm.
hero's journey, and your story is amazing. So the mic is open for you to share and us to chat with whatever feels good for you today, and that'll give our listeners something to chew on and get curious about in their lives, and how they can transform their own lives, right? Because we're doing it and it's possible. So welcome, Tiffany. I'm so excited to have you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation today, especially about like connection. Connection is something that's like at the forefront of everything that I do. I love connection. I actually recently found out I've been dabbling a little in human design, and apparently my makeup is like I'm meant to be a connector. Like that's one of the things. Like for those of you that know, I'm a line four, and so when when I hear that word, it's like it really just lights me so much in so many different facets, right? Like especially when we talk about the nervous system and connecting back to our body, it's like really coming home to ourselves. And for so long, like I had no idea what that meant. I'm like, connect to yourself. Like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean I have something below my head, like connecting to my body? It kind of just felt like something that was there. And so when I really started to dive into this, somatic work and understanding my body, it was all of a sudden like so many different light bulbs went off for me where I was like, oh, there's like something really, really special here. There's something so magical when we think about connecting to ourselves. And I love the word that you use. I use it often of like getting curious, right? Getting curious about ourselves. And I noticed the deeper I got curious with myself, the more excited I was to get curious with others, to come into community. Community is such a big part of my life, and it excites me. And I love just being able to connect with other people, to hear other people's stories, because that's a big part of the reason why I'm even here today, and how I even started my own journey into like self-development and healing and ending up in entrepreneurship. It all started with connecting with other people, with hearing other people's stories and hearing what was possible. And so that's a huge part of my mission, is showing people that we no longer have to be silent, right? Like
Mhm.
reconnecting to ourselves and connecting to other people. And yeah, so it really, that word means so much to me and has meant so much to me.
I know it really does for me too, obviously. I started the podcast, but yeah, because I think there's like so much, it can mean so many things on so many different levels. And the word that you just brought up, community, comes up, I think, in every week's episode, no matter who I'm talking to. And I repeat it a lot, but I really want the audience to like hear, because it is this journey, whether we're on our own hero's journey and we're connecting with ourselves, and there is radical responsibility. I talk about that all the time too, and I'm sure you do, about taking ownership of our own emotions and how we're going to handle life. Because a lot of times, most of us and most of the clients I have and the most people I run across, it's the same story. We're just a teeny bit different, but the stories are not that different. But community is like, we can't do it alone always. Like, it's our
Mm-hmm.
responsibility to take care of ourselves or check in, or like, I can so relate to that. When I first went into therapy, I was like, my emotion, like, what? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I was just angry. I was like irritated and thought people were always disrespecting me and all these things, right? But I had no connection to what was happening in my body at all. I didn't even understand it. And that's so I still think that's so crazy as a nurse. Like, I was a nurse, like with these people in oncology and ICU and then in leadership. But so I could connect to them, but I was so disconnected from myself. But getting back to the point about community, that comes up every time, whether I've talked to um, my shamanic practitioner in the Catskills Angel, or I talk to a nurse coach. It's about you, the responsibility for yourself to find a way to get back to yourself with help or without. But then also in community, there is so much healing. There's so much
Oh,
work that can happen in community. So I don't want people, because I always feel like the pendulum swings a lot, like one way or the other. So it's all about us. And when we talk about that, I
mm,
love that every time it comes up, no matter I'm talking to someone about a mom's circle or whatever it is, the community piece is so important. That is how we were years ago, right? We were in a tribe, and
yeah.
now we're all living separately. We really don't have that way of living, and it really is important. I was just actually talking to Shawnee last week and about motherhood, and right, like, we don't have that ability to have all that help. And then we've been programmed to not ask for help. So I just kind of wanted to like talk a little bit about that community piece. It comes up every single week, no matter who I'm talking to. And I do want the audience to know that it is so important piece, your own stuff, and then finding the community that's going to support you. Because they're out there. Sometimes we just don't feel like they are, because we're just maybe in the wrong spaces for where we are in our moment. So yeah.
Yes, I totally resonate with that. And I think like the word that comes through for me that I've had to do so much work around, right? It's like this piece of belonging, right? Like recognizing that we belong in every room that we walk
Mhm.
into. And I know for me, and a big part of my journey was like I did not feel that way. I never felt like I belonged. I always felt like I was an outsider looking in. I always wanted to belong but didn't, if that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
never found myself in a group. I always resonated with so many different spaces. And so even though I could resonate with, the group over here and the group in front of me and the group to the side, I never felt like I truly belonged, almost like this transplant. And so
Yeah.
as my journey has really unfolded, it's been having that realization and that recognition of like I actually belong in every single room that I walk into because of who I am, and building that belief around that, I'm was available for support and to receive the love that the rooms held that I did walk into.
Yeah. I can relate to that 100%. I felt the same way. And I sometimes still struggle with that. Just because I used to think I resonated with so many things, but then I would look back after I started my work and I'm like, was I resonating with so many things or was I
Mm,
chameleon into so many things like to fit
mm,
in? So I'm still don't know perfectly what that answer is. I think maybe the later of like trying to like fit in so I kind of am able to adjust and adapt because of my
mm,
trauma to whatever situation I'm in because that's the safest way to do it. So, for people listening out there, like if you have some childhood trauma, sometimes like that is a response, right? We adapt. We can adapt easily to situations, but I never really felt like I really belonged either. And so,
mm,
I've done a lot of work around that also, but it's hard because we do belong in any room that we choose to be in.
mhm.
And it's fine. And everybody's not going to be our people, maybe, but we belong in every room. And when we're looking for that validation from people to let us know we belong, we're never going to find it. Like you may never find that, right? Because there's all kinds of things. People have different opinions. People are in different levels of their healing. They have their own
Mm,
triggers.
yes.
Um, yeah. And so that has been a big hurdle in my own healing, like just working through that like I belong. Like I just did a whole thing on Brene Brown's self-love, and I did a
Mm,
couple podcasts on it, and gonna launch a little like short group maybe around self-love because it was so interesting. I just randomly was looking for some stuff to talk about on my by myself on the podcast, and I came across those. And obviously, I love her work, but I hadn't been like looking at it recently. And the 10 things that she talks about for self-love are so resonant for entrepreneurs.
mm,
Like they're
mhm,
all like how to be successful as an entrepreneur are the 10 things that she lists for self-love. It was
mm.
so like for me, I guess as an entrepreneur, it resonated so much with me. I mean, it's obviously for everybody about self-love, but when you're on the entrepreneurial world, like right, there's so many struggles with all that because I always say it anytime I'm talking to one, it's like if you want your shit to come up, yeah, then you should quit your job and be a solopreneur because you thought it was like crazy before because all your shit comes up.
Yeah, no, that's definitely been the case for me and many that I know where it's like it's this amplifier. And I think that definitely played a huge role into like the belongingness, right? Of like you're a part of this space. Like when when I was working at the bedside, I'm a part of this team, I'm in this space. I, became this expert, so to say, in that realm. And then now I'm kind of transplanted into the entrepreneurial world, which I had no anticipation of doing. The fact that I'm here like makes me laugh every single day. And now you're trying to figure out where you belong in this huge online space and really developing your belief in yourself because it is you unless if you have like a team it starts with you. And so yeah, there's a lot of shifting and growing and undoing and unlearning and all the things, and belonging is one of the biggest things that I see come up, especially when I'm working with people but and for myself. So yeah, I totally resonate.
Yeah, and we were talking about something before I hit record, which is what happens. And then Tiffany was like, "You should stop and we should we should be recording this." But I was talking a little bit, and I think this is like a good segue to go back to that. I was talking a little bit
Hmm.
about how shifting in your business, like sometimes, but it's the same for your life, right? Sometimes it's okay to realize that it's time maybe for a shift or you're going to try something new and it can be really really scary because you're like, well, I just decided I was going to do this and am I looking for the newest shiny object, whether it's in life or in business or whatever, right? Like, oh, let me scroll over to that thing. But sometimes, like, I don't know, a lot of us, I don't know if everybody listening can resonate with this or you, Tiff, can resonate with this, but you feel like, okay, I made this decision. Now I have to stick with this because this is the way I was told. I
Mm,
have to work this out. Like my kids
yeah.
signed up for the team, so they have to complete the season. And so I do think there's a piece of that about not quitting, but I also think sometimes like maybe the decision you made was like, maybe it's okay
Mhm.
to shift right now and like giving yourself permission. And even if the new thing doesn't work, I don't know. You don't know unless you try. And that goes for business. We're like laughing, I think, because we're talking about business, but it goes about life too. Like you don't have to stay in something if it's just not really feeling good or it's not working. I mean, yes, you can't jump around every 5 minutes, but I do think shifting is okay and transitioning and trying different things, especially in the world of entrepreneurship. And that's just my opinion. And I'm struggling with some of that right now. Like, really, how do I want my business to look? Like, I thought I wanted it. I had a vision in the beginning, and then I swayed from that a little. And then I now am like, okay, like, I don't know. I want to be home more, but I want to do in person. So, like, what does that look like? And how do I allow myself to maybe let some things drop off and do something different or slow down? And that can be the same for life, right? I mean, what do you think about that? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm like over here like shaking my head like if people can see me, and
They
it,
will, because you'll be on
it's so,
YouTube.
oh perfect. It's so resonant though, because I've also been going through this so much in my own life currently, also with my husband, where it's like this theme has really popped up where I spoke it out to the universe, something that I really wanted, and all of a sudden it gets placed in your lap and it feels like a hot potato, right? Where you're like, oh my gosh, like this is so different from what I started out with. And, you know, I think what's so amazing about that, but also scary at the same time, is we go into something like just with this vision. We're like, okay, this is it. And it's kind of like all of a sudden you spoke about this shiny object syndrome, or we hear that and we start to question ourselves. We start to, not know if this is right versus wrong. And so alongside my journey, like I've really had to learn how to trust my abilities. And for me, that was so tough in the beginning. And I still have a hard time with it, just based off of past circumstances I had where trust for myself was just not there. There was so much
Right.
fear around making the wrong move, right? Like I stayed in a relationship for like
Mhm.
10 years based out of like fear of like, okay, what if I left and it's even worse, right? The thought of like it potentially being better, like never actually crossed my mind. And so I've had to do so much work around like knowing that I'm going to figure it out. And this pivot, right? You're talking about the shift, the pivot, knowing that always have the availability to do that. There have been things in my business and in my life that I have done that did not work out, right? There have been moments where I'm like, this is the thing, only to recognize kind of what you said of like, okay, maybe it's not looking exactly how I thought. And this is where I've really had to connect back to myself of like, okay, am I choosing to pivot because this no longer lights me up? Or is it because there's some discomfort there? And that's really been so much of like my guiding factor, because I have some stuff right now that I'm doing in the back end of my business, and an opportunity that presented itself. And it was a full body yes. Like it was a full body excitement, but then, our humanness comes in, right? The questions, the thoughts, the projections of, okay, but what if I do this and it's not what I thought? And so I really had to sit and like strengthen my belief in myself and the belief in my abilities, and that I'm going to be able to figure it out. And I got to watch my husband also do this like in real time. He just recently went through a huge decision. And it's so interesting being someone like on the outside looking in and seeing like all the discomfort that arises like in the nervous system and the thoughts that come along with it. And then making one decision, I saw him make one decision and then navigate through it in a much different way. And it's, it gave me so much like just encouragement to be like, you can make a decision and change your decision. Like nothing is set in stone. And I think there's so much freedom in that, right? We hear this word thrown around a lot, and I often hear it of like financial freedom or time freedom. But I think there's so much freedom in realizing that I can make a decision today and several months from now, a year from now, if it no longer like really lights me up, if it's no longer bringing me towards like this big mission, so I always go back to like, what is my actual
Mhm.
mission? Um, then I'm allowed to let it go. And I think there is such a fear for so long of like letting it go or surrender, because it's like, well, if I let it go, what if I never get it back? Like, what if I let it go and like I actually really wanted it, right?
I know.
And
But it's so hard to know, like, what is that thing? I know I recently had this situation. I met this woman and at a breath work, and now she's been having me come. Um, Shout out to Zamina because I love her, but I just happened to meet her randomly, and I've been going to her little town a half hour north, and like they've embraced me and they're like loving breath work, and it's a really small town, and but a touristy town in the summer, very busy in the summer. So like it just kind of like I have been asking for certain things too. And then this presented myself. I've been going weekly, and now they want me to come twice a week, and they want me to do other things. They want, and I'm not even, it's not even a lot of work for me because she's doing it because she's really they're trying to change the mental health in their community. It's like so inspiring what's happening there. But I still have this like thought of like, well, I did this other thing and this was supposed to, and even my
mm,
husband said, like, he's like on board with all my stuff, but he's, definitely in a different place. But he was even like, I don't know, things look pretty lined up. Like, I don't know how many more
yeah.
messages you have to get. I'm like, oh, listen to you. So, but we still have that little bit of resistance, right? Of like, I don't know, the shoe's gonna drop. And even if the shoe drops, so then you
Mm,
pivot again,
yes.
right? So then you pivot again, and it's
Yeah.
okay. Like, it's okay. And
Mm,
what is it really that you want to do? Whether we're talking business a little bit here, but people, like if you're listening, it's life.
yes.
It's life. You don't have to stay at the job forever if you're really
Mm,
unhappy. And looking at why you're unhappy. Because
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think many of us left nursing because we were burnt out and unhappy. But many of us loved nursing,
Mm,
right? We loved people.
mm,
We loved being a nurse. I loved being a nurse.
yes.
Even in my leadership role, I still loved leading people in the units. But I was honestly in my own journey, I thought it was all work. It really wasn't all work. It was a combination of things. And then we realized that after, I think. I don't want to answer for other people, but I think most of the people leaving have then found, because we started this journey. I did that podcast for the collective, and I'm still convinced like this is like a big movement for the nurses to get healed. It's
Oh,
to get healed because most of
yeah.
the nurses that are coming out and being coaches are on their own healing journeys. So they're healing themselves and then they're healing their families and then it's rippling out. So it's like this weird dynamic that had to happen because everything was so broke in healthcare, and nurses are such a big part because what people just aren't coming out and being coaches, right? They're healing.
Yeah.
They're doing
Oh,
so much. So I would have never been doing all this self-development work. I just probably wouldn't have. I wouldn't even have been aware of all the
no.
things that I've been involved in.
And I think that's even like the bigger topic there, because I feel so similar of like when I started in this journey, it's like all of this stuff I've been introduced to. And this was the one thing that I said in the collective, and I stand by till this day, where I remember there was a point when I was in the training, 'cause I had no idea why I signed up for this training. It made no sense. I was like, what am I doing? I never invested like a dollar to I mean, outside of
My
my
husband's like,
job,
"You're gonna
like,
do what? And you're gonna pay for
yeah,
this? We're gonna pay
yeah,
for
like
that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know, but yeah."
it just like it made no logical sense. And I remember at a point, like, and at that point, I'd like, like I had a few TikTok videos under my belt that I watched. So like I was convinced I was healed in my mind. I was like, she's done work. Little did little chicken nugget Tiffany had no idea. And I remember in like the collective where I had this moment where I was like, even if I do nothing, even if I don't have a business, because I still didn't even know if I wanted that at that
Mhm.
point, I was like, this was so worth it for me because
Me
the
too.
realizations that I had were just so unmatched. And this is something that's really led me through so much up until this point where I have just continued to be able to say of like even and I truly believe this where I'm like even if I decided to like walk away from everything tomorrow, like if that was just what felt so aligned to me, like I am just so happy that I went down this journey. And you talk about like a ripple effect that like nurses are having. Like I see I'm like getting chills right now. Like I see the healthcare industry really shifting and changing. And like I think of generational healing, lineage work, like the ripple. I had someone who did a consultation call with me the other day. And one of the things that she said was, I'm kind of sad because I don't know if I'm going to be around. She's a little bit older. I don't know if I'm going to be around to see the effects that this is going to have on healthcare. And I sat with that and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be around to see the massive rift that I think is truly available to happen. But like to say that we were a part of this, like that lights my soul
Mhm.
on fire. And like when I think of community and like what's so special about like healers and nurse coaches in particular, it's like I really feel like they can change the world. Like I feel like when you're just so set on, and you said like there's this big communal mission, if we're thinking about it, it's like if each one of us keep going, no matter how many shifts you make, but you still just keep doing those things that feel aligned and like spark your soul on fire, like I don't think there's any way to make a wrong move.
Mm-mm. I don't either. And I really always thought that it was a bigger mission.
Yes.
It isn't so much about being in business because I may stay in business, not be in business, whatever,
Yeah.
cut back.
Yes.
But the changes that I've made since taking that course led
Yes.
me to then take this another thing and really recognize like where am I healing, like that I needed to start healing.
Mm,
Because for me, I was blaming everybody, like, my partner, my first marriage, I'm blaming everybody. Not that people don't have participation in
yeah.
that, but honestly, it was for me to take care of my stuff.
Yeah.
And that started it for me pretty much. I had dabbled like years ago. I'm in some witchery, as my husband says, like some stuff where I was getting in, but then like that went aside. And it wasn't until I really got back into the collective that I was like, oh, okay, like now I really want to. And then I got into my energy healing, and then I got into like a lot of inner child work, and I did my own work with a coach, and on and on and on. But I do
Yeah.
think that yes, people are leaving the bedside, and I think sometimes people look at it like, well, all the nurses can't leave the bedside, but I don't think that's really going to be the case. I
Mhm.
think things are shifting. People are healing. You'll see people that are in business go back to the bedside. You'll see
100%.
people in business because everybody's not made out to be in a private practice. You'll see people decide the time freedom for this wasn't exactly what they thought for their life at the moment.
Yeah.
You'll see people take a consulting, like I just think it's gonna change though, and we may not see it even on our lifetime, but I still think there is a
Yeah.
big impact happening because there
Mm,
is so much like negative around mental health, and I think that is shifting. So even to go to therapy, right? People are like, "Oh, why would you need to go to therapy?" Like I literally think everybody should be either in therapy or have a coach. Like now my belief is like everybody needs somebody to go to.
yeah,
Really, not to be codependent, but to learn more about themselves. And
I
I
agree.
feel like the stigma around that's changing a little, but the coaching is allowing us to like
Mm,
change the stigma a little. And even though we're not therapists, and so I just feel like there's a melting pot that can happen with people doing somatic work because we have a lot of therapists that are still doing just talk therapy. Like a therapist that I go to, me and my husband have been going for years. We go now because I don't know, like he's a part of the family. I'm not sure we're still going, but we go because it helps us communicate. But honestly, he's not
yes.
doing somatic work and stuff like that. So I
Yeah.
see a world where this is all connected. So the
Yes.
therapist, if they're not going to do that kind of work, then they're suggesting someone go to breath work, or they're go to a somatic practitioner, or they do this. There's so much that can happen to really change because, especially in business, right? We think, and doing the self-development work is we think like everybody knows all this
Yeah.
because we're in this little bubble,
Yeah.
but so many people don't know about a lot of things that they can do. Like when I'm taking the breath work to the small community, like this is the first
Yeah.
time they're experiencing something like this. And then you're dropping in the inner child, or you're bringing a little tidbit here,
Mhm.
or you're talking a little bit about somatic work and shaking, or, whatever, a little exercise, and a guided meditation. But they haven't been exposed. It's not like there's anything wrong with them. It's just that they haven't been exposed to it. And then we kind of forget, just like in nursing, when you're doing the nursing lingo, and the person, the family doesn't know what you're talking about, right? Because you're in
Yeah.
that all the time. So I think it's the same. And the more it becomes prevalent, I do think there's a huge shift that's happening. And I think in nursing, it really needed to heal the nurses for generations to come because we were so broke in so many ways. It, and I don't usually like to use that word, but in so many ways we were fractured, and this is a way for us to really get to the root level. And then I do believe people will go back to the bedside. I really do.
No, I totally agree. And like, even as I've continued my journey with like somatic experiencing in particular and like just learning more and more and more. And I've had that thought so many times where I'm like, oh my gosh, like if I could do this work at the bedside, or if I could do this work for people who were, and I do this work for people who are, serving in that community, who are in the medical community, but it's like it's so life changing. And one of the things I heard you say, it's like we don't know what we don't know,
Right.
right? And like when I think of the work that we're doing, it's really creating awareness for
Mhm.
things that just we didn't even realize was available. I was talking to someone the other day about this because they felt just so frustrated, and they're like, I wish. And I'm like, but here's the thing. It's like when we think about giving ourselves grace, it's like if you have two things available to you, and this is what you see, and you don't see or have never been introduced to all the other stuff, how could we get frustrated with ourselves? We don't know what we know
Mhm.
now. And like also how exciting of like I think as we're really starting to see all of the shifts, it's like the sky, it's not even the limit, which is pretty exciting. It's like, what? Like the more I learn, the more amazed I am, where I'm like, why is this not being taught? And now I get the chance to do that with my children. It's like my children can walk me through, deep breath in,
I
mama. And
know.
and I'm like, it makes me giggle, but it also just shows me that it's like shifts are happening, and it starts with us. It starts within our homes. And like that's amazing to think that that's possible.
Right. My granddaughters come over and they get the singing bowls out, and
Um, mine too.
they're like,
Yeah.
they wouldn't have been extra. They get the yoga mats out. I'm not saying they come here and then that's all they do, but they're aware. We
Yeah.
talk about their emotions, and I'm not going to be like when I was my kids were kids, like I was a young mom. I didn't know what I didn't know, but
Yeah.
now I do know. So I can't go back. I can't go
Mm,
back, but I can go forward. And so all I can
yeah.
do is show them a different version of myself. And they were a big part of why I did make
Mm,
some shifts when they were born, because they're
yeah.
girls. And I was like, I can't go back and change anything, but I
Mm,
do know differently now. And for me to be more self-regulated and less
mm.
controlling, because that's one of my things.
Yeah.
But yeah, and to show them like how that can be for a little girl, and having sovereignty and teaching her about her body and the
Mm.
ability to say no and all those things, right? It's so important. I'm not their
Oh,
mom, dad, but I'm their grandma. So um, I love that I'm able to share that with them, and hopefully some of those generational things change,
mm.
will
That
change.
like,
Even if they pick up two
yeah.
or three things, right? Even if your
Yeah.
boys pick up just some of that, which they already have, because your life is different. And that's why I say that the ripple effect is so profound, I
Yeah.
believe. Yes, some people will drop off, but for the
Yeah.
most part, I think the ripple effect, when people start to see the difference in your nervous system, when you're more regulated and you're showing up more regulated, um, it takes two people to dance, right? So to fight, it takes two people. So when the one person is more regulated, the other person kind of like, there's really
Yeah.
no one to like do the dance
Yeah.
with. So things start to change, right? We're regulating our kids' nervous system. So I just think the work is so, so profound on so many levels. And my audience is probably sick of hearing it, but because this is kind of the theme, but I think this is about what we're talking about with connection, being
Yeah.
connected back to your body. We're so as a nation, we're pretty disconnected, and we can see from the what goes on in the world. I mean, we're pretty disconnected. So it's our job. We can't fix the whole world, but we can take care of ourselves and then our community.
Mm. And I think that is like starting to take care of the world,
Yes, it is.
which is like mind blowing. Cause I remember, right, or you hear this so often of like this feeling of like, well, if I take care of myself, then, or I don't have time. And like when I really started to like shift my identity around that and like stepping into this place of like, actually the world gets to be even a little bit more better like when I do, because when I get to show up connected to myself, then everybody else gets to receive that, and the ripple
Right.
gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And even just hearing you talk about like your granddaughter and like talking about like the sovereignty of their body, and like it like literally brought tears to my eyes of like this wisdom that gets to be passed down. And I think of this is really how I've been able to just bring forth so much forgiveness to my past, of this realization of like, they really just didn't know. And like, they really didn't know. And like, there's been so much healing for me in that. And just like you had said, it doesn't mean that it was okay, but I was
Mhm.
also able to settle so much in my system of, as I realized, like, I wasn't the problem. And like it goes so much deeper. And when we can see people and their wholeness and realize
Mhm.
that, and yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
gets to
struggle,
shift the
like
narrative.
people struggle
Hmm.
so much with forgiveness because I
Yeah.
think, and a lot of times because I bring this into some of my client work
Yeah.
but it's not about, right? It's not about saying it was okay because so many of us have
Yeah.
suffered with, there's so
Hmm.
much, like so many people, I think the statistics are way under of physical and emotional and sexual abuse. I mean, so many
100%.
people have suffered
Yeah.
and most in quiet. So it's not about forgiving anybody or saying if you were in an abusive relationship, it was okay, like their behavior was okay. It's
Yeah.
more about like stopping to drink the poison because everybody has their own journey. And it's like, I
Yeah.
only knew what I knew as an 18-year-old mom
Yeah.
coming from a family that was pretty chaotic and dysfunctional. And I love my family, but I mean, that's just the honest truth, right? It's a lot of alcohol, a lot of
Yeah.
dysfunction, a lot of chaos. So then I become a young mom. And so you only know what you know, right? And so I think I was a good mom, but I think that if I'm really honest, like I had to work a lot. Probably there wasn't as much emotional intelligence available, right? Because I didn't really learn that. And then I had to like start to learn that. So you can't really go back, but you can start to forgive. And if you've been mistreated, you can start to forgive like the situation because where did
Hmm.
they come from? It doesn't make it okay. But then forgiving yourself, because I think that's where we struggle and we get stuck, right? People have trouble
Yeah.
forgiving themselves. They're like mad at the thing that happened. But really, what I believe, it's like their own shame and guilt for me, like my
Hmm.
own shame and guilt of like the situation. And how then do you like live your life? And so the forgiveness piece is so huge. I don't know how you like for you, how you've experienced that, but I think it's huge. And just getting people to understand it's not really about saying it's okay. There's nothing that's okay. It's really about almost like letting go and surrendering so that because it is like
Yeah.
drinking poison every day when you live with that.
Yeah. No, that
That
you,
resentment, that guilt, that shame, that
yeah.
anger, it so makes your life like stop almost. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, especially because it was such a big part of my journey, right? We talk about just these, traumatic relationships, and I definitely was in one. And, really figuring out how the heck do you forgive some of that? Because there was a part of me that didn't want to, or feared if I
Right.
did that maybe I would allow that to happen again. And there was a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, right? Even guilt of getting out. I think a lot of people don't talk about the grief that comes after it, of like, oh my gosh, I got out of it and now someone's in my place. And how do you cope with that? And forgiveness for me, we talk about, a big part of my mission is being able to speak up so people no longer have to suffer in silence, because that was a big part of my story, just the suffering and silence and painting a smile on my face as if nothing was going on, because there was so much fear if people knew. And so for each step that I took towards forgiving myself, and as I really started to understand the responses of my nervous system and understanding maybe why I moved or didn't move in certain ways, there was so much release there. Being able to release this narrative that I was incapable, or that I was disempowered, or that I was weak, into this place of like, I actually was none of those things. And
So, you know what
yeah,
I would love for you to share is, because the listeners don't know your whole background, right? So you were
yeah,
very open about being in an abusive relationship. And
yeah,
so I know I've heard you share the story before, and you shared it the other day, I think, on one of your stories. And so
yeah.
when we're talking about somatic work and we're talking about somatic practices, and because we've been all over the place today,
Yeah,
being in your body, which happens,
yeah,
but being in your body. And so you shared something that really, really, I think explains it really well in a real kind of way about your glittery dress, right? Because
yes.
I just think that for
Right.
me, it really hits
Yeah,
home
yeah,
on people that are listening and they're wondering, like, what are they even talking about?
yeah,
And this is an example of when you're maybe in an abusive relationship, or you have had abuse, even if it was when you were a kid, right? Or you're an adult in an abusive relationship, or there was abuse in your house, physical,
yeah,
emotional, spiritual, it doesn't matter, right? Like, we want you to understand that it's on so many levels, that, and we tend to think like somehow it's our fault because we allowed it. And I have to say, society makes us think, and sometimes women, sometimes we're not nice to each other, because sometimes we'll be like, and I know people have, I've heard this a million times, like, why would she stay in that? Like, if it's an adult relationship, why would
yes,
she stay in that relationship? Right.
yeah.
So, but there's a
Mhm.
whole, that could be a whole nother podcast on why
Oh,
someone
yeah.
stays, right? So,
Yeah,
but when we talk about like that old stuff that happens to us that's kind of stuck, and you have a great example, it's not great because it happened to you, but a really
no,
good, I
yeah,
think, example
yeah,
of having lived through an experience like that, what happens in your body and how in the current day it shows up again, even though you're not in the same
yeah,
space of not being safe, because safety is in our body. We need it in our body, in our nervous system. We didn't even touch on that today. And so, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there. And if you
yeah,
could share that, because that is a really
yeah,
good thing to grab, I think, for people to grab onto that example.
yeah. No, I love sharing this example, so I'm happy to share it. So there was a point in my life where I was in this abusive relationship. It was very toxic, emotional, physical. I mean, all of the things fell under that relationship. And I was in this relationship from a very young age, from the age of 15. So I was in it for about 10 years. And so there was a point in my journey, right, where just I could do nothing right. It felt like that. And we were going to, I think it was a wedding. And so I was in this super sparkly dress and I was just so excited. I loved getting like dressed up at that point. And I remember just getting into his car, right? And this was like his prized possession. It was all clean. And I sit down, and glitter from my dress, it just, for those of you that wear glittery dresses, like it got everywhere. It was all over the seat and the floor and him, and just, it was everywhere. And so as he looked around, he just lost it, right? Getting so upset because he had just cleaned his car. And this caused me a lot of feelings and a lot of different emotions. And, stuff transpired after that. So many, many years later, and I had started dabbling into the personal development world. I was remarried and with an amazing man. Like, this man was definitely sent from God, the universe, like handpicked for me, of like, he is just going to be what you get in order to really truly heal. And I had a moment where I was in a sparkly dress. And this person had always been a very safe person for me, never gave me a reason, never said an unkind word to me. And so I sat in his car and just glitter got everywhere. And it was like all of a sudden I was no longer with him. I had been kind of transplanted right back to the moment of my first encounter with the glittery dress. And all of a sudden, I could feel my body just take over. I started hyperventilating. I started crying. I went into a full blown panic attack. I was trying to pick the glitter up. And again, if you try to pick glitter up, like, it doesn't work. And so as I'm sitting there just having this full body response, not logically understanding like what is going on, like why am I having this response? My partner, he wasn't my husband at the time, God bless his little soul, looks over to me and is like just so confused, right? I'm sobbing and I'm apologizing. And in that moment, I'm starting to realize that like there's this huge disconnect. Like, what is actually going on? And eventually I was able to settle down where he was just able to provide just some words of comfort. But as I really started to like delve into the nervous system and really understand like why did I actually have that response, because I was no longer in danger, right? I was no longer in that relationship. I was no longer in that past experience, but my nervous system did not know that, right? When we talk about doing things on a body level, on a nervous system level, it's not about telling yourself, right? Because I knew I was in a healthy relationship. I knew I was in a safe place. This is why it's like you can't just tell yourself, you have to show yourself. And I didn't understand that until that experience, which was very real. Like, you would have thought something really, really awful was happening to me. And so I was able to just have so much grace and compassion for myself, and realizing like there's still some stuff that's stuck there in my nervous system. And so that eventually led me to this whole journey with really healing things within my nervous system. But I always go back to that story because it's just such a good example of like
Mhm.
no longer being in that scenario, but my body not knowing that. My body went right back to that experience that it had based off of the evidence that I had collected up until that point. And
Yeah, I
so,
think it's a really great example to really like
mhm,
have people see that. Like when we talk about nervous system regulation and somatic work and body work and breath work and all the different things that people are
yeah,
doing to help people heal and get past their old traumas and live a more productive, empowered, confident, um, experiential life of freedom or whatever that it is that they're looking for. Because so many times we're spend our whole life searching, we're not even sure what we're looking for. And these things keep getting in the way and we don't understand them and we tend to blame others. But really, this stuff gets stored. These
yes,
memories, this stuff, you may not even think about it, and it gets stored, and I think that's, like, it's just such a really great way to, like, see that actually happens, and luckily, you were able to put it, together.
later.
Yeah, later. I had a similar experience, not with a dress, but I was well into my self-development, and I was, um, going on trips by myself at this point, so it was a good ways into my self-development, and I was coming home from the trips. And
Mm,
let's just preface this with my husband in the beginning didn't even like to be like without me. So for me to be going on trips by myself and, he was so supportive and everything. And so I started traveling by myself, doing retreats, going to Peru, doing all these crazy things. but I would come home and he would be supportive while I was gone. He would take care of everything, to the best of his ability because he's working. And I would come home and I would walk through the door. And even though I missed him, and even though all this stuff, and I would like be kind of angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and finally he pointed out to me, it was like 2 or 3 trips in a row. And I came home and like he picked me up or took the morning off or things that he doesn't normally do because he's so busy and was supportive during the trip, like really, really supportive. There would be no reason for me to come home and like start in on like anything, like, why isn't this done or whatever. And he finally said something to me, which was really good. And he
Mm-hmm.
basically had, communicated to me like it was really hurtful. And so we had been working on our communication. So I had to listen to that. And I was like, well, and then I would get defensive. And I was on a retreat in San Diego, just like maybe last year. And I had a really profound week. It was a really hard week for me. It was a really intense week. And there wasn't a lot of downtime. And the last breathwork session that I was in, was very, very intense. And I had a bunch of stuff come up around female embodiment and like really feeling into like fitting in, what we talked about, fitting in,
Mm-hmm.
being part of the group.
Mm-hmm.
And I was feeling a little disconnect all week and I need downtime and it was very intense. And I struggle sometimes when it's a really intense week because I need some quiet downtime. And so the last breathwork session happened and it was intense and it felt amazing. But then as soon as it got done, I had this really weird cloak of shame that came over me. And I didn't really understand it. So there was a lot of crying, which sometimes can happen in breath work. And I think it was a culmination. And then someone, worked with me a little bit and I was able to kind of feel into like what some of that stuff was. And then I was getting in the car to leave. Like literally, I was getting in the car to leave and I was putting my suitcase in the trunk. And I had this vision or this memory of growing up. And my mom never wanted us to really go anywhere else, celebrate with anybody, go on a vacation by ourselves, like leave the house, have friends. Like it sounds like she's a horrible human being. It's not true, but it was just her way. So you couldn't go with friends for your birthday. You were always made to feel guilty and bad, like it was a bad thing.
Yeah.
So I recognized, like, as literally I was putting the suitcase in the trunk, that that's what this is. That I come
Mm-hmm.
home, even though my husband is so supportive, and I feel like I'm going to be attacked, even though I'm not. And so
Yeah.
I have to attack first. I
Yeah.
have to go on the defensive.
Yeah.
And it wasn't logical.
Mm-hmm.
It was stuck. It was a
Yeah.
stuck thing in my body that the memory when I'm away, it's almost like this guilt and shame, even though it's 100%, he was in agreement, we were supportive.
Yes.
I wanted to go. I had a good time or a whatever, a profound time, whatever it was. But I would come in the door and then I would do this thing. And that was so old.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I had the remembrance of it, it was like so bizarre at that end, but something must have came out in that last session.
Yeah.
And then the memory was just like, okay, it's time for her to hear this. Like I feel like the universe was like, it's time for
Mm-hmm.
her to like see what this is. And
Yeah.
and now I'm conscious of that when I travel. I'm
Mm-hmm.
conscious to be not a good girl when I get back, but like
Yeah.
not defense. I have to tell my inner child, like, you're okay. It's safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's so much work for the people that are listening that is like stuff that's happening in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
It's like such old shit.
Yeah.
And unless you work through it or find help to work through it, it is interesting how it will come up and come up and come up. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, that was my sparkly dress story too, of like,
Yeah.
holy crap, that's what this is. And that was so
Yeah.
old. My mom has been passed for years, and that was old, old stuff. But yeah, I was like the tiger. I had to attack before anyone. And he wasn't going to attack logically, but in my body, it was like someone is going to say something to me.
Yeah. And this is what's so cool. Like, as we get to like shift the state of our nervous system around particular stories, like the narrative changes.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like, it was
Yeah.
just so amazing. And again, why it's like, it's not always about logicking logically getting your way out of it, because logically looking at it, it didn't make sense, right? And this is where, again, like we talk about, I don't want to throw words out there, but this implicit, this stored memory in the body, and that can't be gotten to unless if we're doing things like, that you were discussing. So yeah, it's so amazing to see like what gets to happen and be unlocked, and how we get to show up differently.
Yeah, I'm sure, when you're doing your work, it just is mind blowing sometimes. Like I know what
Oh
can
yeah.
happen in the work, and I'll be in a breathwork session or I'll be in a somatic session with somebody, and I just am always like, really? That's what
I always say like our bodies are so weird.
I'm like, wow. Like, and it's not because I think I'm amazing. It's like the work. Like
Yes.
work is amazing. And
Yeah.
energy fields that we're in are amazing. And once you start to learn how to work with them and the universe, and my husband would say that's the woo, but it's really not. It's so much science based now. Um,
Yes. Which is
I,
amazing.
yeah, I mean, it's just so crazy that I'm
Yeah.
always so pleasantly surprised and like my
Oh
own
yeah.
mind blown when these things come up in my
Yes.
practice. And something as simple as the breath work. I mean, it's just crazy. Or a simple guided meditation. Or it's one, and what I want people to understand is everything won't work for everybody, right? So
No.
it's okay. You have to figure out like what's going to work for you and find your person that maybe can help you along your path a little bit. It isn't about being codependent on a therapist or a coach. It's really about finding what works and creating your systems that work for your body because we're all different. I have a client that breathwork is not her thing. She feels like she's like choking. It's
Mm.
hard for her because her nervous system was in a very different place. So I had to like transition her what we were going to do and like work with that because that
Yeah.
wasn't going to work with her where she was in the present moment. It just wasn't going to work with her because sometimes it's just overbearing for people. So even though I talk so much about breath work, it's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes have to
Yeah.
so simple or
Yeah.
and I'm sure you'll find that with your clients. So just so people know, like we talk about all this stuff, but it's baby steps. And I think the awareness is the key. Just
Yeah.
start because your life can be so different because we all have stuff. We all have a book in us. That's what I say. People think their
Yeah.
lives are boring, but we all have a book in us.
Yeah.
We all have
Yeah.
very interesting lives and what we've, maybe been through. And it doesn't mean you have had to have torturous childhood because it can be as simple, right? As your mom worked and she wasn't available because she was trying to put food on the table. So she was trying to make
Yeah.
like allow everybody to live and eat. So she had
Yeah.
to, that's not anybody's fault. It's just what it is. So yeah, there's so much. Anyway. So as far as your journey goes, what would you say to our listeners? Like you have endured, persevered, your own hero's journey. Um, and so what advice around connection? I always ask someone to just leave like one nugget. And I will hopefully something in the stories, Tiffany's story today resonated, what she does. She's doing amazing work out in the world. And really, we just want you guys that are listening to just realize like how important it is to connect back to yourself. So what
Mhm.
would nugget would you leave them with?
Yeah. For me, it would be like leaning in and saying yes to the things that like light your soul on fire. Like taking, I loved what you said because I say this so often of like, can you just take one step at a time? Like in the beginning, for many, myself included, I constantly looked at like how many steps I felt like was needed to be taken. And when I really just kept saying to myself, can I just show up for just one more? Like, can I just take one more step? Can I show up for one more session? Can I just go to one more workout class? It was really starting to like chunk it down for me to realize what actually was able to be possible, like one decision at a time. And so that really would be the thing that I would say is like, can you just do one step at a time and focusing on that so then you can get to the next, but really just focusing on that 1%. Can I just worry about the 1% for right now
I
and
love that.
seeing what happens? Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Tiffany, thank you so much for spending so much time with me today. We could talk
I
and talk and
love it.
talk. And I'm gonna, is there anything you want to share with the audience? We're gonna be sharing all of Tiffany's socials and where you can find her and the amazing work she's doing. She has an amazing membership called The Spark. So yeah, what do you do? Is there anything you want to share? You just want to let them check in because the mic is yours.
I would say definitely just take a look if you're feeling called or you have questions. I'm a responder, so I love to answer questions. That my door is always available. I love getting to hear people's stories and to share this work. It's really transformed my life. I've gotten to, co-facilitate and create with so many other people, and so my hopes is again that you guys just get to say yes to yourselves and your journey, whether it's with me, with Sally, with someone else. It's like that's my true heart's desire is to just see you guys getting out there and connecting back to yourselves. And so yeah, if you feel the pull, my door is always open. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much from my heart. This was so beautiful. And I just want to share with everybody, I have a new retreat coming up in Costa Rica in October. So be looking for that. I'll share that information on my podcast notes. And yeah, it's going to be 5 nights right off of the beach, manifesting. And it's a very intimate retreat, only 8 women, and 4 beds are sold before we went live. So I'm going to put that out there for the world this week. And yeah, our last retreat in Sedona was magical. So there'll be yoga and manifesting and breath work and really a lot of connection to the body. So anything resonated today, hit me up in my DMs for more information. All right, everybody, have an amazing day and go out and connect with somebody. And I'll see you next week.